Hi there, this is Phil with Phil Effects, and I've got another Harmony tutorial. This one is really just a beginner's tutorial in moving from animating, creating drawings on every frame to initially starting to working with keys. So let's go ahead and get started. So we need something to animate here. The first lessons that we did in class, we were doing traditional animation where on every frame we had a separate drawing. And this time what we want to do is make one drawing, and then we're going to animate that drawing across the timeline. So let's start with something simple. So we'll go in here and create just a sphere, make a little green ball out of it, and get that, and then we can select it. And if we want to animate it, the first thing we need to do, and we've talked about this in class, is this is the pivot point right here in the center, and this is the object, and you really want to animate and have the pivot point, which is the center of rotation, placed in the center of rotation for what you want for the device. So the simplest way to do that is make sure that your advanced animation toolbar is enabled and is shown up here, and you can either use the rotate or the transform. And for this one, I'll just use the transform because it shows up a little better, and we place that. In our case, we're going to place that in the center of the sphere, or as close to the center as we can get. So that puts our center of rotation in the center. So now I'm set to do transforms. The second thing we want to do is we need to decide ahead of time if we want to use separate positions or we want to use a 3D path. And I'll talk more about this in class, but if you use separate positions, and the way you look at this is you need to call up the layer properties for this specific layer. I show this in my layout, in my work view, because I use this a lot. But if you don't have that shown up, you can just double click on here, and it calls up the layer properties. And so we have the choice to use a 3D path for our transformations or separate. Using a 3D path has some advantages, and using separate has some different advantages. Let's start with using separate positions, and then at the end I can show you the difference of what it means in terms of how you manipulate the path. So we'll start with that, and this actually is the start position that I want. And I'm going to do transforms. And this next thing is when you're blocking out an animation, you typically would like to use stepped, or I call them stepped keyframes. Harmony calls them stop motion. So if we go up to here to animation, we can see that I've set to use stop motion keyframes. And you'll see what stop motion keyframes do. They're, as the name implies, you don't get a change in motion until the very next keyframe. That's really advantageous in trying to block out an animation, because you can check in your timing of how things are moving relative to what you desire and get that all ironed out ahead of time. And once that's finished, then you can move to either a completely linear motion or a linear motion that you've modified so you have ease in and ease outs of each of your keyframes so you can smooth things out. So we're going to start with a stop motion keyframe, and I need a keyframe on the very first position, and I can add that keyframe by either clicking here at keyframe, and you can see that adds it, or let me undo that. I can just go in and type F6, and F6 also puts a keyframe in there. So the way you add keyframes is you always want to take your playhead and move it to the time you want. And notice everything I have disappeared. So there is one more thing we need to do with this, all right? Because we were drawing before, our drawings extended out for the full time. So I purposely slid this so I would make this disappear so we can see that we don't have our drawing here. So we actually, before we start adding keys, is we need to extend our drawing out to the extent of what we want. And the way that we can do that is you move the playhead out to the end of what you want, and you can either go in and right click on here, and we can say extend exposure, or I can hit F5 on the keyframe. Either one works, or F5 on the keyboard. And so now we have our ball and it is extended across the entire timeline. And now we can start doing some animations. So I was saying before, you want to move the playhead to the time you want, and then you move your object to the position you want. So I moved my time to frame 10, and I'm going to move my position over to here. Now it would be nice if we could see the path that our object is going to take in our camera view. Well, it turns out you can do that. If you go up here and you do show controls, the show controls will show the path that the ball is actually taking between this point and this point. Now it pops because we have our stop motion keyframes. All right, but it is showing the path that it's going to take. We can turn that off if you want to turn the motion so you can see the path that it's taken off. You can just click here or you can click there. The other thing you can do is on a Mac you can hit Command F11, or on a Windows PC hit Control F11, and that will toggle the same thing. So I'm toggling with the keyboard Command F11 and I'm toggling that show controls on and off. So then I go over and go to here. I set my time to 20. You see it there. I go to 30, and you can see, having that path displayed, you get a nice picture of where your movements have been going. So if this isn't what you want, or if it is what you want, you can quickly see that your animation is proceeding the way you expected it to. Alright, so we've got a quick animation that I've set up. Let's go ahead and play this. I'll hit loop and hit play. And I purposely set this up for 10 frames each. And for my purposes of what I want to do today, that timing is acceptable. If you're trying to do like a ball bounce or something like that, you want to make sure that the points that are your keyframes. So when you're at a peak and when you're down, hit the floor. When you're on your next peak, when you're down and hit the floor again, with your next peak, that the timing between those is correct. And if you look at your reference videos, especially in a bouncing ball, you'll find that a ball will come down, it speeds up, and then it hits the ground, it comes up and will float, come back down, and it'll hit. And as it loses energy, the time between hits and the distance between hits is going to speed up. So it's going to not go as high, and the distance that it traveled is not going to be as much. So this is why you want to block things out, and this is where you would take care of that. So we have this all blocked out, and I'm happy with it. So now we want to take and change this to be motion keyframes instead of stop motion keyframes. So I have the first keyframe selected. I hold down Shift and I select all of these keyframes, and I can go up and right click in the timeline and I can say set motion keyframe, or as you can see, the keyboard shortcut for that is Command K. So I do that, and now I have motion keyframes. Note also that now you're seeing tick marks along the path, and these represent frames, not keys. Keys are the keyframes are the colored little balls here, but the tick marks represent frames. So each one of these is the frame, and the timing, the space represents the timing between when each frame happens. Alright, so you can see the space is the duration of the frame, and they're all equal, which means this is a linear transition. So now let's go ahead and play this so we can see this. And now you're seeing the ball actually make it transition, where when we had it in stop motion, you just saw it pop between the keyframes. So now we're starting to see a transition. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we'd like to make this so we travel out of the first place. We start to accelerate, but we're not moving that fast. So we slowly come out, and then we speed up, and we're going fairly fast. And then when we come into this next keyframe position, we want to slow down. So we want to ease out, and we want to ease in. And the way that you do that is by setting eases on the keyframes. And the quickest way to do that is just to select the line, the drawing layer, and go over here and select these little look like curves, and that'll bring up setting ease for multiple parameters. This is a fairly powerful tool, and if we go in, what this is doing is this is setting the ease and the ease out and the ease in, and what's nice is you can interactively work this, and if you have your controls displayed, you can see the results of your actions. So let's take this handle and we'll pull this out, and this is going to ease us out, and if I just hit apply, we will see what happened here. And so now you can see the tick marks here are relatively close, and then they get further apart as it goes down the line. And if we just quit right now and hit play, or actually I can come over here and just hit, or excuse me, I have to hit close. Let's loop it, and we hit play. Watch how it comes out of that. All right, so it comes out fairly slow and then snaps right to that corner. So that's a good start. That's exactly what we're looking to do. So let me go back in, and I'll hit this, and I'm at, again, my first key. So I want to move to the next one, and the quickest way to do that is you just hit apply and next. And so now it goes to the next one. And this is where this graphical interface is quite handy, because we can see that we came in fairly fast into here, and if I want to go out fairly fast into the next one, I can hit apply, and what you'll see is we come in fast to here, and then we go in slow to this next one. If I want to change that such that I want to slow in to this next one, I can change this and hit apply, and so now we'll come out slow, we speed up, and then I slow down as I come in. And then what I would want to do is slow down as I come out of the next one. Let me hit apply again, and so you see that. So we have quick tick marks close together, which means slow coming out, relatively fast going down here, and then slow coming in. Then I'm slower going out, and then I speed up, and I'm pretty fast coming in, but I'll fix that on the next one. So I hit apply and next. Same kind of thing on this one. I want to take, and I want to come out fast, but then come in slow, and I want to do the same thing here. So I hit apply, and we can see that. So I came out slow, I'm fast in here, and then I slow down as I come into this point. So you can see I really just want to walk this waveform all the way down the line. So let me just hurry up and do that, and we can see what we have after we finish here. So I will do apply and next, same kind of thing. I want to do that and do this, do apply and next, same as here and here, do apply and next, and I want to slow coming in, apply and next, and hit apply and close. So now let's play this, and you can see from where the hash marks are, as I come into each keyframe, I ease in and I ease out. So I ease into this key and I ease out. I ease into this key and I ease out. And then I'm relatively fast between each of these transitions. So let's loop this, and I'll hit play. And that's what we're seeing. So you can see it have a little bit of hang time as it hits each of those corners. All right? And so that's what our easing does. We don't have this linear motion. I have easing as I go into each corner, and then I speed up on each of the transitions. All right? So then the last thing I did want to show is we want to talk about is how you would change the path. So changing the path with separate keyframes is a little more difficult than changing the path with 3D path. But I'll show you how we can do it with both. So to change the path with separate keyframes, we need to scroll this down, and we now can see the X position, the Y position, and the Z position. And so I can uniquely go in and just change X without changing Y, or just change Y without changing X or Z, and so on and so forth. So let me double click on the X position, and that brings up the Bezier editor. And the Bezier editor allows me to adjust for velocity of how my object moves in and out of different points. All right? And I can navigate within this graph editor just like I navigate within the camera view. If I hold down spacebar, I get a little hand and I can move this. If I want to zoom in, I can hit 2. And zoom out, I can hit 1. If I hold down Shift and M, it resets to the default view. So let me go over here and let me zoom this in just a little bit. And let me select this key, and you can see I have a Bezier handle. And what I can do with this is I can bend this, and as I bend it, it makes some interesting gyrations as to how the path is going to take going through space. Now this gets a little bit difficult to work. That's what I'm saying. If you know you're going to want to modify the path you take, using separate keyframes is probably not the way to do it. You probably want to use the 3D path, because this gets to be quite difficult to try and manipulate this into something that represents what you would like to see. And what you end up having to do is basically play some games with these handles until you can get a waveform that shows the path that represents what you'd like. Alright? But this is basically how you do it if you're using separate keyframes or separate positions. So let me close this and let me create a new drawing layer real quick, and we'll just call this 3D path. Alright, and close that, and we'll turn this one off. And on 3D path, let me create another ball again real quick. We can do this pretty fast. I can go in and let me center the origin again. But this time I'm going to animate using a 3D path. Alright, and so we go in here and oops, I created my drawing on that one. So let me go out to here and hit F5. So my drawing's copied across. Take my animation, I default to stop. So let's go in and I can set my first keyframe. And then I go to frame 10 and turn control on. Go to 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. Alright, so now you can see this path. But we set this up for 3D paths. So when I go in, Shift Control, set this to motion keyframes, you can see right off the start that my curves are not straight lines. This is the path the ball is going to take, and the path already has somewhat of a curve to it. There's a way that you can change how much that default curvature is. It has to deal with going in and changing preferences. I'm not going to show that at this point in time, but I just wanted you to know that you actually can change what this default curvature is. So we can see that we have a path here already. Now this is where a 3D path gets really slick, because I can go in, and if I know I want to manipulate this path, I can go in and just by taking my cursor and placing it over I want, I can place a P or type the letter P, and it puts what's called a control point. Okay, so with a control point on there, I can take these control points and place them all over the waveform, and then I can go in and I can move these. So I can grab each of these control points, and you can see by just grabbing the control point, I can manipulate this way the path that my ball is going to move. And this is where the 3D path is really, really powerful. In fact, much more powerful than separate positions, because I have this ability to go in and modify my my path. Now note, these control points are not making keyframes. Look down here in my timeline. I added all those control points, and none of them correspond to a keyframe down here. All they do, all the control point does, is allow me to modify the path that's taken of my object. So if we went ahead and we play this, you can see my ball is following this loop-de-loop path that I define using my 3D path. So the bottom line is if you have an animation, and say you've got a flying saucer flying through space or something, and you really want to be able to control that animation path, I would suggest to you that when you set up that animation that you really want to use the 3D path. If on the other hand your animation is fairly straightforward and you want to have a lot of control over your X and Y animation parameters, then use the default, which is separate. So that covers most of the things I wanted to cover with initially using keyframes and Harmony. So this has been Phil with PhilFX.